Okay, so we're moving into the feel for the different lines. Now it's going to get more complicated. So we finished the Cain and Abel story, really. When you see it's an even quicker narrative than the Adam and Eve, but it's a very famous story too. And it's sketched in about 3 lines, basically, of action. But it's a very famous story. And it's a story about vengeance, being an outcast, meeting the tribe, and for some reason it fascinates people to think of a brother killing a brother. And we're going to see the genealogies pretty soon. And I think you'll see in the genealogies that some of the writers don't like the idea that the Hebrews have a murderer in their genealogy. I mean, you know, classical people, Hebrew and others, I guess you could say they're superstitious. They worry, they take these things seriously. I mean, I don't think you and I really believe. Maybe we do because we're so much used to it now and it's so habitual that if we're, let's say, Hebrew or we're from this background, that we have a murderer in our ancestry. This is a writer's story. I don't see it has anything to do with a person or me or someone else as a descendant of these people. But I'm sure these people back in the later period worried very much about this. That there was so the poet, you see, is extremely important person. He creates these stories. And then subsequent generations have no knowledge of the world. They just are born, they live for 30 years, they die. 30 maturity years, I mean. I mean, what do they know in that time? Hardly anything. What do most people know? Almost nothing. And, you know, they don't have a very short, long spell of mature life in this world before something bad starts to happen, disease or whatever, war, floods, famine. So they accept the poet's stories as real. And that's what half the people in the world today still do. In the Middle East, for sure. They take these legends seriously. Anyway, you will see that that's a problem. So look here, Cain has a child. We don't even know what his wife's name is. The narrator is not interested in that aspect. He is only interested in Eve as the mother of all humankind, if you want to call it that. And Christianity is only interested in Mary, Mother of God, for that matter. Now we've got another Mary Magdalene running around, and that's everyone's into, but she's just another sort of version of Mary, Mother of God. Both have the same name even, but there's no one else in Christianity that's of any real importance, feminine-wise. Same with here, Eve, that's it. We don't even know the names of the other ones, so we get down to Jacob, maybe. In any event, Abraham. Cain's first child is called Enoch. And each of these people have a kind of a reputation in historical terms. And he was the first builder of towns. And therefore his town was given the name of Enoch. Well, Enoch was obviously a town that was known. Enoch had a son, Iraq. Iraq became the father of Mehujael. They're interested in genealogies. No, we don't really know much about the wives here. Mehujael became the father of Methuselah. Methuselah became the father of Lamech. This sounds like another little song, even in English. And then it stops a bit. Lamech married 2 women. And the writer has a little more information about these. The first was Ada, the second was Zillah. And Ada gave birth to Jabal. And he was the ancestor of tent dwellers and grazers, owners of livestock. Again, a two-brother situation. His brother's name was Jubal, Jabal and Jubal. And he was the ancestor of the musicians, the lyre and flute players. Is this a very scientific genealogy we're getting here? Not really. It's very helter-skelter, isn't it? A few little legends, a few women's names pop up here and there. It's just kind of like a folk memory of some things that are known from the ancient past that the storyteller is reciting. It's not complete, is it? I mean, first of all, the only women we get are in this third or fourth generation. Why does he know them and no others? Because there must have been a song about them somewhere, a little poem or something. Anyway, she gave birth to Tubal-Cain. And he was the ancestor of all metalworkers. That's Zillah. So we have metalworkers, tent dwellers, musicians. And Tubal-Cain's sister was Naamah. Well, that's really interesting. What about the other sisters? Don't they? I mean, it's just like, these are details that just pop out of nowhere. So I'm trying to show you the very helter-skelter, unscientific, not abstract version of this material. And I think the whole thing is from the end of it here. Lamech said to his wives, and I think this was an actual song that the writer took the material from. Adam and Zillah, hear my voice. Lamech's wives, listen to what I say. I killed a man for wounding me, a boy for striking me. 7 vengeances taken for Cain, 77 for Lamech. I'm sure that was a very old song that survived just like a Bob Dylan song would. And the writers then picked up the Cain story out of that. Well, so what? 77 for Lamech. So what? So what? Who is he? What did he do? What was his life? It's very incomplete, you see. Extremely incomplete. And this is good in a way. It's the real thing. It's the way the world really is. It's how you remember your past. But again, it's not the Word of God. It's totally human, as you see. That's the whole point. Yeah.
Is this attempting to explain how the Earth became populated?
Well, just wait. We'll get there. Well, so let's say what we can say about it, not what we can't yet. I don't know what it's attempting to do, actually. I'm just showing you the characteristics of the, just show you the characteristics of the Yahwist writer. Because we're still in the Yahwist narrator. In any event, suddenly, another thing pops in on line 25 after this song. I was just trying to show you that. What does this writer know about Lamech? Nothing. What, that's all you're going to remember about me after I'm dead? 77-fold. Where was I born? How long did I live? Who did I marry? How many kids did I have? What did I do in my life? What? That's all one little sentence. Yeah, that's the way history is. How much do you know about your great-great-grandfather? I'll bet you don't even know his name, half of you. I don't know well, I do know my great-great-grandfather. I don't know my great-great-grandfather's name. Not on my mother's side or my father's side. And now before that, it's like, oh, total darkness. And I live in a literary age. That's the way it is. This is written. So this is not the Word of God. This is human. This is the way humans are. This reflects the world. We're just trying to pull some information out of the dark past here. A few songs, a few bits of data, that's it. Song here, a poem here. But suddenly we change gears. Adam had intercourse with his wife. And she gave birth to a son she named Seth. Well, how do we get back to Adam? We're already way down, 5 generations down the line, I thought. Because we're back to the other narrative. We're back, or going back, to the Elohist. or the one who's using God as the name. And she gave birth to a son, who she named Seth, because God has granted me other offspring. Seth, by the way, was the name of an Egyptian god of the underworld. I don't know, in fact, how that affects this particular story. But the granted, I suppose, from another Hebrew word related to it. I have a footnote from Shaph, granted. She said, in place of Abel, since Cain killed him. A son was also born to Seth, and he named him Enoch. This was the first man to invoke the name of Yahweh, the Lord. Well, we're going to find some others are going to be invoking the name of the Lord, but let's see if we can put these genealogies on the blackboard here, or the whiteboard. First of all, I'll show you these are not separate genealogies. These genealogies are going to overlap. Can you just, I can't write and read it then. Give me Cain. Cain, who's the next one after Cain? Enoch. Who's after him? Irad, or Arad. Who's after him? Mehujael. And who's after him? Methujael. And then Lamech. Let me stop a minute because Lamech has little information about him. Anyway, he's got another Cain pops up here. But he doesn't really matter too much. And then over here, we start with Seth. Now, on chapter 5, let's just get the genealogies here. The material in chapter 4, 25, 26 is like splicing material. It's in the middle. It's partly using the name God, as you see, partly using the name Yahweh. It's kind of mixed up, and it's not clear what it belongs to. But chapter 5, this is the list, the roll. What do you have of Adam's descendants? What word do you guys have? Chapter 5:1. Anyone have anything else? Huh?
It's a written account.
The account. Who else? Something else?
Book of generations.
The generations. Okay, the generation. I think that's good. Normally, I think we have generations of Adam's descendants. On the day God created Adam, He made him in the likeness of God. Male and female He created them. He blessed them and gave them. We're back in the narrative line of the first creation story. And look what the name of the person or being doing all this. It's now what? God again, not Yahweh. This is what scholars have figured out here. We flip back. Because what's going on is splicing here. But we'll show it to you as we can. It's going to continue all through Genesis and Exodus. I'll put it over here. Seth. Okay, after Seth, we have Enosh, huh? This guy likes detail too. Kenan, that would be similar to Tubal-Cain and also Cain. Kenan, Mahalalel, and Yarad or Jarad or Urad. And then after him, Enoch. And after him, Methuselah. And after Methuselah, I'll read this in a minute for you. Oh, guess who? Lamech. How did that happen? How did we get the same names in the two different people's genealogies? Oh, because we have two different narratives that the authors have spliced together with two different versions of the genealogy. One very informal, like I was trying to show you, sort of based on poems and ditties, helter-skelter, the Yahwist. And the second, repetitive, abstract, ceremonial, meant to be intoned in a ceremonial way, in a repetitious way. And I'll show you how that works in a moment. Let's just show the relationships here. Okay, Cain, Kenan. No, this is working. Let me see if I can find something that's going to work for me. Let's try this one. Maybe I'll chuck that. Cain, Kenan. Enoch, Arad, Yarad, Mahalalel, Methujael, Lamach. I've basically got them all. So, someone decided that they didn't like the Kenite-Cain genealogy. Scholars call this other line priestly, and priests would be worried about having murderers in your genealogy. Whether that's the reason or just a different tradition is hard to say. But whatever the reason is, a new genealogy is placed here. Nothing about murderers and nothing to do with Cain, a new character, Seth. And Seth basically is in there for one reason only, genealogical glue. He doesn't do anything, he doesn't affect anything, he has no character, but at least he's not a murderer. His first son, Enosh, is the first to evoke the name Yahweh, says the previous text, but I don't know where to place that previous two lines, whether we should put 25, 26 in the Yahwist, or whether we should put them in the next one. Probably in the still Yahwist, it's hard to say. In any event, this is the role, or these are the genealogies of Adam's descendants. That same things, these are the heaven and earth when they were created. On the first day God did this. On the second day He did this. On the third day He did this. And when it was done, He finished that. Well, this is the same style. On the day God created Adam, made him in the likeness of God, male and female created them, blessed them, and gave him the name of man the day he was created. When Adam was 130 years old, he became the father of a son. In likeness as his image, he called him Seth. Adam lived for 800 years. After the birth of Seth, he became the father of sons and daughters. In all, Adam lived for 900 years, then he died. When Seth was 100 years old, he became the father of Enosh. After the birth of Enosh, Seth lived for 807 years, became the father of sons and daughters. In all, Seth lived for 912 years, then he died. When Enosh was 90 years old, he became the father of Kenan. After the birth of Kenan, Enosh lived for 815 years, became the father of sons and daughters. In all, Enosh lived for 905 years, then he died. So, it's the same style as the first creation story. It's repetitive, it's the same format, it's abstract, it's ceremonial, it's using the name God and not Yahweh. You see now, if I were to teach this class, like most people might teach it, and just read, you say, oh, the second chapter 5 is priestly, and then move on. But that wouldn't tell you anything. Wouldn't tell you anything. Without your hearing this, and my actually taking the time to point it out to you, you wouldn't remember, and it wouldn't mean anything to you. So you're going to have to go through this material very slowly if you really want to get it. And that means the class has to go slowly. That means we're not going to work that hard at the beginning of the class, the first half of the class, because it's more important to get this material and see how it works, and to make sure that you remember it for the rest of your life, so you can teach it to others, and that you have a feel for this material, and to rush through it and learn nothing, just learn what's in it. If you go to a Sunday school class, a church, someplace like that, you'll learn nothing. You'll just learn the story and that's it. You'll not see how it's put together. You won't see anything of what's really interesting, because anyone can read it. It's seeing how it works, how it came to be, how it's put together, what its characteristics are. That's the interesting thing. Yeah.
I just kind of got lost from what point.
Well, see, that's the problem with the Bible you're using.
No,
but honestly, what I'm trying to say is, it's very difficult to use a little Bible like that. Is that divided into two columns?
Yeah.
You got a little teeny Bible.
I said notes.
No. You got a little teeny Bible. It's divided into 2 columns and you're lost. It doesn't surprise me at all. You see, it isn't a matter of whether you're writing it down or not. You really need to get a Bible that you can work in, that you can mark. I mean, you should be able to see. Your eye can't even follow a little Bible like that because it's so squashed together. You're going to be lost. So yeah, you're going to be lost constantly. The point is, spend a little money, get yourself a good-sized Bible with big print. Even the double columns of that Bible, I think, is bad. And I really think if you can find a Bible like this, which has, mine's falling apart, I apologize because I've used it so often. But if you find a Bible like that, which has full-page stuff, you'll never be lost, even if you don't even hear what I'm saying, because you can find the stuff in a second yourself. And there, you can't find anything quickly at all. But anyway, what's the question?
I just want to know the exact verses. Like, the first guy talking from it was like.
Yeah.
To the,
Well,
the second one.
I told you basically it starts in 5:1.
So 5:1.
Yeah, 5:1.
And that goes all the way to about.
Well, it'll go all the way till it stops, but I'm not where it stops yet, so we'll just wait.
Okay.
And the other material is, the intermediate material was 4:25 to 26, which it wasn't clear. And 4:17 to 4:24 was the Yahwist genealogy. And see, the Yahwist is not a big genealogist. He's really more interested in stories. Where he can, he puts them in front. And the, let's call this priestly because that's what they do. Even though it's using the name Elohim for God, and that's an E text because it's E, Elohim. The other is Y, they call it, because of Yahweh. It's still priestly because it's ceremonial, and they like to distinguish, as Ron was trying to tell you the other day, between different types of e-texts. This is more temple-oriented, priestly, meant to be in tone, not very story-like. There are e-texts that are more story-like. But that's getting really into the fine points, and I don't think we need to go that deep into the fine points, except to show that this is normally considered to be, whether it's true or not, a priestly text. I don't know what it is, but it's the same writer as the first creation story. How do I know it? Stylistically, I can tell by looking at it, just even in English. It just stands out like a sore thumb or a rotten apple. You can see it immediately. And what about the other characteristics of this writing? It's repetitive. Instead of God did this, then he rested. Then it was the evening, morning, the first day. He did this, then it was the second day. Then he rested. Then he rested. It was the third day. Here it's, then he died. Then he died. Then he died. Then he died. It's exactly the same. And again, with a little Bible, I really wish you'd get a decent Bible, but you get whatever you think you should have. But you wouldn't even be able to read your notes in that. But with a text that really hasn't laid out for you like this, I'm sorry if mine's a mess, your eye can see that, the different passages. It's just not a study Bible what you're using. Even that one has been ruined because they took this one and they collapsed it down because people weren't buying this because they wanted it to look like that with 2 columns. I'm grateful for this Bible because 2 columns is impossible to use a study Bible too. It's very difficult. You can't write stuff in. It's very difficult. But anyway, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm just trying to help you if you're really seriously interested in this subject to do work in it. In any case, if you do, go to a used bookstore someplace and find a Bible that lays it all out across the page with plenty of space that you can mark it up and make some notes and do that kind of thing. You can call attention to the things that you need to call attention to. What about there's no interest in who the wives were. Yes, you call it male chauvinist if you infer if you think that's what it is. But I'm sure most ancient cultures were like this in those days. It's a very big lifespans. The person writing this is a know-it-all. He likes to give you data, precise data, like he makes believe that he knows how old Adam was when he became a father, 130 years. And now he wants to make believe he knows how long he lived, 800 years after the birth of Seth. And although I lived for 930 years, this is a person who likes to throw figures at you. He wants to awe you, wants to impress you. Oh, you mean these aren't the real figures? No, I doubt it. We don't even know if Adam really existed. Forget the real figures. This same person is going to tell you how big Noah's Ark is. He's going to give you the whole dimensions. He's a big show-off. And he wants to awe you with his knowledge so that you feel inferior. And I think probably in the world in which these people live, they succeeded. This is how you awe. I don't like to say it, stupid people. You make them feel like, oh my God, look what that person knows. I don't know anything. That person knows even the ages of the ancestors 30 generations ago. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. And again, you see, the Word of God people would crucify me if you want to call it that. But, you know, the problem that we're dealing with here is that this is, you know, talking about the Word of God is, I told you from the beginning, putting too much on the text and the text itself can bear without becoming ridiculous. The text is not ridiculous. The text is an impressive text, a very impressive cultural document. But if you try to make it into more than it is, you could say it's, you know, inspiring. It has the Word of God in it in terms of telling people how they should live in the history of the world. But to think that every word in it has to do is the Word of God, I think you're just pushing it. You're pushing the envelope way too far. And of course, then, how would you account for this? God doesn't make mistakes, does He? Not in most people's view. It's not a mistake. It's just two different oral lines that have been spliced together because the editors didn't want to lose him. They didn't sit down and say, well, look, this is a little bit jumbled. We got Methuselah healed. That's right, you know, but one's supposed to be from Seth, the other's supposed to be from Cain. You know, it's two different text lines. One you always, well, that's the best explanation. If you have a better one, it'd be great to know it, but I don't know a better one, and if I did, I would tell it to you. Anyway, what about these years? Are these something that we can know where he got them from? Some people say, oh, this is the months that they lived, not the years. Okay, if that helps you, fine. I don't have an explanation. Again, it's meant to awe you. It's the only explanation that I have. It's meant to overwhelm you, awe you, impress you with the knowledge. And of course, that these were superhuman beings in the early part of time. They lived forever. Maybe it was supposed to be months and not years, and that may be, but notice, I think, as time goes on, the number of years is beginning to go down. Because we're going to get down to the normal human lifespan, which isn't even normal for that, which for Abraham, I think it's going to be, what, 120 years or something? Moses or somebody. We're going to come down to what's a normal lifespan. We've got to get down from 900 years down to 120 years or so. An interesting character in the, I don't want to read this whole thing here, but that became the father of sons and daughters, then he died, except for the numbers, it's always the same. Repetitious ceremony. Enoch is an interesting figure, line 21. When Enoch was 65 years old, he became the father of Methuselah, and Enoch walked with God. That fascinated the ancients. What did it mean that Enoch walked with God? See, Enoch in the other genealogy, he's a towns builder, but here he's a different sort of person. He comes later in the genealogy, similar to, has the place that I think, well, in any case, I don't know what you would say his place was in the previous genealogy. But he walked with God, and see, he lives for 365 years, which is a curious date. It's an astral date of the number of days in the year. That may tell you something. What it tells you, I don't know, except that people have associated Enoch with some astral situation. He walked with God as repeated, and then he vanished. God took him up. See, that's really a mysterious character. So later on in the Second Temple period, where a lot of literature was written, there's even books written in Enoch's name. Why? Because Enoch was someone who supposedly went to heaven and visited God and knew all about the heaven in these places. At least that was what the writers were playing off of, who wrote books in Enoch's name. So we have the book of Enoch in the 200 BC period. It's a very famous book. So Enoch lives an astral number of years, whatever that means, and he also goes up to heaven or God or wherever and disappears. So he's an actual precursor of Jesus in a way. Jesus goes up to God and never came back, as far as we know. Okay. When Lamech was 118 years old, he became the father of a son. He gave the, now we're getting into more detail here. Line 29. And he calls him Noah because he's going to comfort us. Is Noah in the other storyline? Not yet. The other storyline ended with Lamech. And so Lamech is important because he's the father of Noah. And Noah is important because he's the person who is going to save mankind a second time, if you like, or a first time, depending on how you reckon it. And he's going to be a consolation for the ground that Yahweh cursed. Now notice we seem to be back in the Yahweh line here in line 30. Even though it also seems part of the Elohist priestly line. Because we're still in the situation of big numbers, 777 years. Notice, how do you like that one? Lamech lives for 777 years. Does that ring a bell? What's the bell?
Magic number 7?
No, the Yahwist song previously said, 7 times vengeance will be taken for Cain, 7 times 7, or what did he say, 77? 7 times 7 for Lamech. So now this guy's got Lamech living 777 years. It's just that the numbers are part of the tradition and he's just using them differently than the other guy. Because we have the 7s, so of course 7 is an important number in past, but the fact that is why he chose 777 years, well, because of the 777 of the previous material. I think this shows to some extent that the Yahwist may be earlier. Because here it looks like the priestly or whatever is working off it. For instance, he knows the Adam and Eve story. A consolation derived from the ground that Yahweh had cursed. Well, Yahweh didn't curse any ground in the previous priestly material. Maybe some material left out of the priestly here. Who knows? In any case, when Noah was 500 years old, still showing off his knowledge of figures and precision, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Wow, man alive. What, he had triplets? And didn't he have a wife running around someplace? In any case, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now, 6:1. Change gears. Change gears. So, we are back in 6:1. I think you'll see in the Yahwist narrative. 530s there is unclear, but pretty much still priestly, Elohist. But 6:1, when man had gone to be plentiful on the earth, and daughters had been born to them, the sons of God, again another fantastic situation that only the Yahweh would envision, looking at the daughters of men, saw their pleased, and they married as many as they chose. And Yahweh said, my spirit must not forever be disgraced in man. Ah, there is Yahweh now again, not God. For his flesh, he is but flesh, his life shall be no more than 120 years. So now Yahweh's narrative intervenes, and it does look like the two are somewhat related here, more than scholars would admit, and this is interesting to check on. In any case, the Nephilim, or the giants, were on the earth at that time. Hebrew Nephilim. What do you have, giants in your thing, or Nephilim? Nephilim. Nephilim is a Hebrew word meaning, well, it means now superhuman beings. Titans, maybe. We're on the earth, and this looks like a little reflection of the old Greek sort of God and human legend narratives. And the sons of God had intercourse with the daughters of men and had children by them. Well, those are what the Greeks always wrote about, gods having intercourse with human maidens, right? And all the big heroes of the Greeks came out of that. Well, so a little bit of that is floated into this. These are the heroes of days gone by, the illustrious or famous or well-known men. Again, the Yahweh doesn't tell us a lot, but it tells us more than the Elohist or the priestly person tells us. At least he's got some information about the ancient time. There were some problems back then, and we had some superhuman beings screwing around, pardon me for being crude, with human maidens. And this resulted in a race before us that were, maybe they were Neanderthals, I don't know what we would want to call them. Giants or Nephilim. And they were the product of this situation. But they're also heroic too. It's not all evil. Now in the later period, this is considered why the earth was corrupt. And again, the flood is going to come now as a result of that. But it's, the people in later generations said it was because of this fornication, if you want, of these super creatures with human women that God sent the flood. But here the Yahweh just says, line 5, 6, 5. Yahweh saw the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and all he thought about was evil or wickedness all the time. So he regretted having fashioned man. This goes back to the Adam and Eve story of creation. And he was grievous in heart, or he grieved. I am going to rid the earth's face of my own creation. Yahweh said he talks like in the Adam and Eve and Cain story. He's not abstract like in the priestly. So he said to the animals, also reptiles, birds of heaven, I regret having made them. Everybody, I'm going to get rid of them all. But Noah, he liked. Noah found favor. And fragment. This is the story of Noah. Have we heard that before? Yeah, twice before. These are the generations of earth when they were created. These are the descendants of Seth. This is the story of Noah. What have we done? Swung back to the priesthood. So up to 6:8, 6:7, 8, we're in the Yahwist, 1 to 8. 6:9, back to the Elohist priesthood. Noah was a good man, a man of integrity. Now we're telling stories in this line, not just abstract materials. Among his contemporaries, he walked with God. Here it's Noah walking with God, not Enoch, by the way. Noah became the father of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Where do we have that before? Oh, line 532. When Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Something's repeating somewhere here. Noah became the father of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The earth grew corrupt in God's sight and filled with violence. God contemplated the earth. It was corrupt, for corrupt were the ways of all flesh on earth. And notice it's God that's being used in the narrative. Therefore, scholars call this Elohim, priesthood. God said to Noah, the end has come to all things of flesh. I've decided this because the earth is full of violence of man's making. I will efface them from off the earth. Make yourself an ark out of resinous wood. Make it with reeds, and here's the know-it-all priestly narrator. He knows just how the ark is made with resinous wood, pitch inside and out. He knows the length is 300 cubits. He knows its breadth is 50 cubits. He knows its height is 30 cubits. Just like he knows all the times people lived, he knows the dimensions of the ark. And he knows it's got 3 decks. Kind of like to say, was you there, Charlie? You know the ark had 3 decks? Well, this writer knows it. And he knows just how big it was and everything. Now this is the best story that one can have for separating out the text and showing how they are spliced together. You're going to have to bear with me. It's really tough to separate the story out, but I will try to do it for you. Now, in the Yahwist previously, in 6:5, he saw the wickedness and he regretted having made man. Now, in 17, there's a bit here. For my part, I mean to bring a flood and send the waters on the earth to destroy all flesh on every living creature under heaven. Everything on earth will perish. But I will establish my covenant with you. Scholars say that hooks up with line 8. That material 17 in line 17. And part of 18. I will establish my covenant with you. And they also say that the second part of 18, and you must go on board the ark, your sons, your son's wife along with you, hooks up with 16 and what God said to Noah. You say, well, how do they know this? I don't know how they know this. This is how they separated it out. They've studied it, and these are the conclusions they've come to from the language. It may or may not be, but let's just look at this anyway. From all living creatures, from all flesh, take 2 of each kind on the ark, male and female, every bird, every kind of animal, every reptile, very wordy, you see. And that's another characteristic of the priestly narrator, not the priestly ceremonial repetitious person, but this narrator person. He's very wordy compared to the Yahwist. For your part, fry yourself with eatables of all kind, lay in stores, serve food, and so on. Noah did this. He did all that God ordered him. We see that's a God text. So from 18 to 22, it's a God text again. Look at 7:1. Yahweh said to Noah, go aboard the ark, you and all your household. Yahweh's text. They say that should go back to 18. I will establish my covenant with you. Yahweh said to Noah, go aboard the ark, because you see, it's already said in line 18, and you must go on the ark, you, yourself, and your sons. They will put that back in the priestly. You must go upon the ark, second part of 18 and 19, to the priestly. 7:1, the Yahwist. You and all your household, for you alone are among this generation who I see as a good man in my judgment. Now look at the difference that we know is 2 different narrative lines because of the next sentence. Of all the clean animals, take 7 of each kind, both male and female. And of the unclean animals, take 2, a male and its female. Of the birds of heaven, 7 of each kind, both male and female, to propagate their line over the whole earth. So, maybe if you're a religious person, you just read this with eyes shut and don't see these issues. Whether they're problems, I don't know. But the thing is that the one line has 2 by 2 and that's it. The other line is more complex. 7 of the clean and 2 of the unclean, and the birds 7 of them all. Although how he's going to get all these creatures on this little ark, I haven't got the slightest idea, but that's the stuff of children's bedtime stories, and we don't ask questions like that. Anyway, I will rid the earth, he says, anyway, for in 7 days' time, he's interested in the number 7. I mean to make it rain on earth for 40, he's interested in the number 40, for 40 days and nights, and I will rid the earth of every living thing that I made. That comes back to here where he said, I regret having made, if I regret line 6, 8, I regret having made them, for they fashion nothing but wickedness all the time. I mean to, then I will rid the earth of every living thing I made. No, it's the same vocabulary, and that ends that narrative for the moment. Line 6, they say, is back to priestly. Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters appeared on the earth. Let's see, where does that hook up with? They say, let's see, that hooks up with line 22 there. Noah did this. He did all that God had ordered him. If you skip 7, 1 to 5, you haven't skipped anything because it just flows right along. Noah did this. He did all that God ordered him. Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters appeared on the earth. You don't need the stuff in between. Because in fact, the editors felt all this material was so important and holy and precious that they didn't want to lose anything. So though it destroyed the narrative and made it totally incomprehensible, and the whole narrative is like totally, cut up, and it's almost impossible to make any sense out of it because of this splicing that has gone on here. And from the 2 different text lines, you can see where basically the text lines have come in. Anyway, line 7, back to the always. Let's skip line 6. Noah did all that Yahweh ordered. Line 5. Noah with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives boarded the ark to escape. You don't need line 6, you see. The always just continues right up. So, Noah with his wife, sons, wife boarded the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Again, of the clean animals that are not clean, of the birds, 2, male and female, that's interspersed, part of 8 and 9 from the Elohist. Let's go back then on line 10 to the always. Skip that material in part of 8 and 9. So, Noah, sons and wives, boarded the ark to escape the flood. Line 10. 7 days later, the waters of the flood appeared on the earth. You can't put the other material in there because the 2 is from the other narrative. In the Yahweh's narrative, it's 7. Now, it's very odd. One of the reasons that we've got 7 here for the Yahweh's is that in the Yahweh's line, Noah's going to make a sacrifice at the end of this. And he's going to kill some of the animals. Well, you see, if he kills some of the animals, he's killing off a whole species. You can't make a sacrifice and have all the species live. So the Always is quite aware of that. So he knows mankind sacrifices clean animals, not unclean animals. So for the clean animals, he's going to get more than 1 pair. So they can do some sacrificing, you see. And it's really weird. That's where these labels fall out. Because to call this one priestly, and yet the other is interested in priestly things like sacrifice, and has 7 instead of 2 as the number of the clean animals, so that we don't get into a problem of ending a species at the end of this little trip here. The Always at this point seems more interested in priestly things than the Elohist. But anyway, be that as it may. Line 11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day, oh, I know where we are. We're back in the priesthood. We're back in the know-it-all person. He knows exactly how old Noah was. He knows exactly what day it appeared on the 17th day of the second month. He knows exactly when the flood waters appeared. That very day, all the springs of the great deep broke through the sluices in the heaven opened. Now, hold on. Let's go back to where the Yahweh line 10. 7 days later, the waters of the flood appeared on the earth. That's how the Yahweh expresses that. And he's only interested in, he's got a different calendar scale than the Elohim. And if you put the two together, you're in total, you can't do anything with this story. So how come? For thousands of years, no one ever saw these problems in the text. Because people don't read for themselves. They intone. The priest or the minister or the rabbi, whomever, says, okay, everybody read. And they read out loud, and they have no understanding of what they're reading. They just go, blah, 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 and that's it. And that's why we have universities. And that's why, really, we should have more people in this class. The problem is in the way that GE has been laid out in these classes. And in our department, we used to fill these classes up because we didn't have these big, huge sections of classes for basically numbskull classes, introductory classes with 150 students or something in them, so that they don't take the other courses that are introductory courses, which are more depth, like these courses. And we didn't have those classes. We only had these classes, so all people who wanted a rich studies credit took these classes. But they've rearranged the classes in the department, and they've drained the life out of these classes, and for those huge classes that are just a total requirement, which is, maybe it's good for the university, but it's bad for the department. In any event, forget that. I'm just trying to explain that these are the kind of classes that are really people who are Bible people should take, because then their mind could be opened up. Whereas a class like that, when I'm describing Introduction to Religion or American Religious Diversity or big, huge section classes, no one's mind is going to be opened up to anything. They're just superficial, like bonehead English class or something. And these are the kind of classes that people need to take who are interested in religion of any kind, and unfortunately that's not the way things are happening anymore in the department. But, be that as it may, we're here and we can see this, and it is really interesting information. It's not my information. If you want a good description of this, look at the Anchor Bible. They cut the whole thing up for you there. Basically the results of modern academic scholarly research. I never saw any of this when I read the Bible, frankly, so I'm no better than most people. I don't pretend to be better, but once you see it, you see that this is happening. Okay, the time frame. 40 days and 40 nights. First, the Yah was 7 days later, then 40 days and 40 nights it rained. Line 13, back to the priestly elements. That very day, Noah and his son, Shem, Ham, and Japheth boarded the ark. Oh my God, I thought we'd already been on the ark. Line 7. Noah with his son's wife and his son's wife boarded the ark. We already boarded the ark. How come we already boarded the ark? Because that's a different narrative line. And the editor is splicing the two together really haphazardly in some ways, the best he can. He's just got his scissors. He's going, taking this here, pasting that there. That's what you do. Cut and paste. Okay, this here, this here, this here, this here. And he's basically got a narrative to satisfy most people for eons of time, right? Okay, so, and the Elohist priestly, I'm calling it Elohist now because it's an E-text, uses God. He's careful about names too. The Yahweh says Noah with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives. He's not so careful with names. This guy wants you to know it's Shem, Ham, and Japheth because he's interested in the genealogy. Boarded the ark with Noah's wife, 3 wives of his sons, with them wild beasts of every kind, cattle of every kind, reptiles of every kind, crawls in the air with birds. Oh, that's just like the first creation story. reptiles of every kind that crawls on the earth, birds of every kind, all that flies, everything in wings, one pair of all that is flesh. Now that's not what the always said. You see that? How many can't see that? The always said 7 of the clean, 2 of the unclean, 7 of all the birds. You don't have to be a genius to see this, actually. Although it actually is extremely intelligent to have someone work this out. And so they went, male and female, every creature that is flesh, just as God ordered them. And then, in 16 at the end, and Yahweh closed the door. That's Yahweh's. That should tack on to line 12. It rained on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and Yahweh closed the door behind Noah. Don't need the stuff in between. The flood lasted 40 days on the earth. The waters swelled lifting the ark until it was raised above the earth. Now I don't know if it's 40 days and 40 days for the Ovis or just 40 days. You follow me? The Ovis originally said that it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. And then he says the flood lasted 40 days. Does he mean that it rained, or that after it stopped raining, the flood lasted 40 more days? You follow me? I'm not quite sure about that. But anyway, be that as it may, let's leave that and keep moving. I want to try to get through the story before we go home, if you don't mind tonight. The waters rose and rose, swelled greatly on the earth. Line 19, 18 and 19 rather. And the ark sailed on the waters. This is back to the priesthood. Let me see if I can see where that splices from. Oh yeah, 16. And so they went out in male and female, female every creature that is flesh, just as God had ordered. God. Then Yahweh comes in at the end of 16, that's Yahweh's. So we go back to that part of 16 where we still have God, and we tack on, the waters rose and swelled greatly on the earth, and the ark sailed on the waters, and so on and so forth. This chap, he knows more precise things, not just 40, which is just a general big number for these narrators. 7 and 40 are the big numbers for the always. He knows that the waters rose 15 cubits higher. You see, the whole of heaven was submerged. Then 15 cubits more, like the measurement of the boat, submerged the mountains. So all things on earth perished. Birds, cattle, wild beasts, everything that swarms. See, it's the swarming creator guy. The priestly swarming creator story person. And every man, many men, not just a few. Stop there, 23. Everything with the breath of life and nostrils died. Everything on your dry land. Yahweh destroyed every living thing. That's Yahweh's. That little piece, see if I can figure this, goes back to 17. The flood lasted 4 days on the earth. The water swelled lifting the ark till it was raised above the earth. Then fast forward. Everything with the breath of life in its nostrils died. Everything on dry land. See, you don't need that stuff in between. That's from the other narrative. Yahweh destroyed every living thing on the earth. It reads perfectly fine without it. In fact, if you cut this story into its constituent parts, you'd have 2 pretty good narratives. At the present time, you still have a pretty good narrative, but it's totally wordy. Anyway, it's an unforgettable narrative. No one ever forgot this story, even in the form we have it. So who am I to either complain or otherwise? Anyway, once again, he destroyed every living thing, man, animals, reptiles, birds of heaven. He rid the earth of them, so that only Noah was left and those with the ark. Stop. Elohim. The waters rose on earth for 150 days. That's a different time frame than the always. That goes back to, so all things of flesh perished and moved on earth, birds, cattle, wild beasts, everything that swarmed. You see, he's got the same thing as 21, the always has in 23. And the end of 24, or rather 24, goes back to 21. All things perished that moved on the earth, cattle, wild beasts, everything that swarms on the earth, every man. The waters rose on the earth for 150 days. So if you can follow the time frame of the Elohist priestly, what is the time frame of the Elohist priestly? It's 1 year. Because what he's going to do is actually coordinate it with the temple cycle of prayers. So probably the priest in the temple would say, when everyone was there on a given day, this is the time of the year that the flood went above the houses. And this is, the flood was still so-and-so, 150 days later or whatever it is. We're going to go all the way to a whole year. Because as you see, when did it start for the priestly God? When did it start? God. Sorry to be so, it's very difficult even with my Bible. I don't know how you do it with your Bibles. Let's see. Anyway, I can't find exactly where it said. Where was that date on the second month? What line was that? Oh, there it is, line 11 of chapter 7. The 600th year, the second month, on the 17th day. That's when it started. So we get 150 more days. After 150 days, the waters fell. And in the 7th month, first of all, line 24, the waters rose for 150. So we have 150 days, then another 150 days. That's 300 days. And the Elohist even knows when the dry land first appeared. Line 8.5. The waters gradually fell until the 10th month, when on the first day of the 10th month, the mountain peaks appeared. You can see that in the temple, they would maybe announce this as a commemoration. Oh, it's the 10th month. This is the day on which the mountain peaks reappeared. Salvation of mankind. Anyway, let's go back here. 8.1. But God had no in mind, God again. So the last part of 24 is still an Elohist, and then the beginning of 8.1 is Elohist. And all the cattle that were with him in the ark, God sent a wind across the earth, the water subsided. The springs, the deep sluices of heaven were stopped. Line 3, rain ceased to fall from heaven, the water gradually ebbed from the earth. That would be Yahweh. That goes back to line 24. He rid the earth of them so that only Noah was left and those with him in the ark. Rain ceased to fall from heaven, the waters gradually ebbed from the earth. Line, let's see, the second part of 4 there. After 150 days, the waters fell. That's, see, the editor's being careful. He's putting two like material together. So that goes with the waters rose on earth for 150 days, the end of chapter 7. And the water subsided, 8.1. And the springs were stopped. And then 8.5. The waters, 8.4. After 150 days, the waters fell on the 7th month, the 7th day of that month. The ark came to rest on the mountains. So you can figure out the days there. In terms of the numbers and see how they add up with the February 7, whatever date it was, 17th beginning. The waters gradually fell to the 10th month, and then the mountain peaks appeared. But look at the Yahweh, line 6. At the end of 40 days, Noah opened the portal, he made the ark, and sent out a raven. So now it's back to the 40-day scheme. Where does that hook up to? Line 3. Rain ceased to fall from heaven. The waters gradually ebbed from the earth. At the end of 40 days, Noah opened the porthole. So I think it's 40 and 40 for the Yahwist, and 150 and 150 for the Elohist. Although it may be more for the Elohist. I'd have to figure out his days. They're better than this, but you can maybe do that. Now we get the sending out of the birds. Again, this is typical Yahweh's material that's so memorable. The raven went off, flew back and forth, and I guess nothing much happened. Then he sent out the dove to see where the waters receded, and the dove, finding nowhere to perch, returned to the ark, for there was still water around. This is all Yahweh's material. And then he brought it back like a dove keeper in one of those little sort of cage situations that they keep doves in. Very graphic. In 7 more days, and he sent the dove out again, and then finally the dove came back with an olive branch in line 11. So Noah knew that the flood was over. Again, his days are 7, so it's 40, 40, and 7. He waited 7 more days, he sent out the dove, and it returned no more. That's the end of the Yahwist. Back to the Elohist, line 13. It was the 601st year of Noah's life, in the first month, and the first day of the month, the water dried up in the earth. Back to the Yahwist. Noah lifted the back of the hatch and looked out. The surface of the ground was dry. That hooks up with line 12. He waited 7 more days, sent out the dove, and now returned no more. Noah lifted back the hatch of the ark, looked out. The surface of the earth was dry. Back to the Elohist. In the 2nd month, the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. You see, 2 times it's mentioned the same thing. So the guy's just putting up the 2 narratives, splicing them together, putting one next to the other. So let's put, where does that go? 601st year of Noah's life, the 1st month, the 1st day of the month, the water dried up in the earth. The 2nd month, the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. Okay, now we have the outcome of this story, finally. Line 15, we're continuing the God narrative. Then God said, Noah, come out of the ark, you yourself, your wife, son's wife, all the animals with you, all things with flesh, birds, animals, reptiles, crawl on the earth. Let them swarm on the earth. There's the swarming motif of the creation story, first narrative. Let them be fruitful and multiply. That's the first creation story. So Noah went out with his son's wife, and his son's wives, and all the wild beasts, all the cattle, all the birds, all the reptiles that crawl on the earth, one kind after another. No sacrifice. No need for the extra animals. 2 by 2. Line 20, Yahwist. Noah built an altar for Yahweh. Yahwist narrative. That's why he needs more animals. That hooks up with, let me see where I can give you where that hooks up with. Jeepers creepers. I think line 13. Noah lifted back the hatch of the ark, looked out at the surface of the ground, and it was dry. Noah built an altar for Yahweh. And choosing from all the clean animals and all the clean birds, he offered burnt offerings on the altar. He's burning up everything. All the clean animals and birds he's getting worked up with. And here's Yahweh, the lover of meat and animals and flesh. Yahweh smelled the appeasing fragrance, the fat burning on the fire. Same as with the Cain and Abel story. Yahweh said to himself, okay, now I'm appeased, I'm propitiated. Never again will I curse the earth because of man, because his heart contrives evil from his infancy. Never again will I strike down the living things that I have done. So we get a moral like in the Adam and Eve story. As long as the earth lasts, sowing, reaping, cold and hot, summer, winter, the days and nights shall cease no more. That's the moral in the Yahweh story. Let's just finish before you go home here. I'm sorry to keep you, but I'd like to get a good place to stop. Chapter 9, 1 to 17 is the outcome of the Elohist priestly story. God blessed Noah and his son, saying to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. We know that that's part of the first creation story, the creation story, the priestly narrative. The terror and dread of all the wild beasts, that hooks up with all the wild beasts of the earth, all the birds, all the reptiles of 19. They handed over to every living plant, crawling things to provide you for no less than foliage plants. I give you everything with this exception. You must not eat the flesh with life on it. That is to say, the blood. And I will demand. So this one is don't eat the blood of anything. Priestly, not kosher food, not eating blood. Taking the blood out of the meat before you eat it, because blood was considered the life. I will demand an account also blood vengeance of any man who takes blood from his fellow man. He who sheds blood shall have his blood shed by man. For in the image of God man was made. Be fruitful, multiply, teem over the earth. I will establish my covenant with you, with your descendants, with the birds, cattle, wild. I will establish my covenant with you. No thing of flesh will be swept away again. Again, the same promise, but in different circumstances. In the Yahwist, I will never again strike down any living thing because he liked the sacrifice. In the Elohist, I don't know what the reason is, but he decides to be a good fellow now, God, And as long as man doesn't eat flesh with blood in it, I will not destroy the earth. And here's the sign of the covenant that every living being will know for generations. I set my bow in the clouds. It's a covenant between me and the earth. When I gather clouds over the earth, and you see the rainbow, I recall my covenant, and so the water shall never again come for flood to destroy the earth. When the bow is in the clouds, I shall see it and call it to mind. And God and every living creature, every kind that is found on earth, will be reminded to me. And God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant I've established between myself and every living thing on the earth. So, the rainbow sign belongs to the second narrative, the priestly narrative. The sacrifice belongs to the Yahweh narrative. My friends, that's tough. Very difficult. Sorry to keep you, but I thought we'd get a good place to stop. Apologize. We'll get on from there and move quicker.